And I was just, this shirt specifically does. And
God damn it, Zach!
I know him.
I've been missing that shirt for 3 months!
That's what I've been waiting on right there. It's just a little.
God damn it.
Is that your shirt?
That's my fucking shirt!
Okay, so. I got kind of grossed out the other day. I called my dad to wish him Happy Veterans Day, which, by the way, happy late Veterans Day to any vets we got out there. My dad's always wanted to tell these old war stories whenever I call him this time of year. And so, this is like, any other year. I was listening to him tell this story, and I realized, as he's telling me this story, this isn't a war story. My dad's trying to tell me a sex story. And so, this is my dad. I'm kind of like, And as he keeps on going, he keeps on talking, I realize this is a story about my mom. And so I'm kind of like, come on, fella. And as he keeps on going, he keeps on talking, I realize, I don't know, I have a whole lot of information about my parents, like their early years or how they met or anything. And I realized for some reason, my dad's trying to tell me about the very night that I was conceived, which also happened to be the very same day that he met my mom. And again, I'm like, sir, let's end this conversation. But he just kept on going. So, long story short, my father used to be a Bible salesman. He was a traveling Bible salesman, and he met my mom in an Amish community that he just happened to be moving through. He was looking for work. And as he was telling this story, he kept on referring to this quote-unquote warm little Amish honey. And I didn't really put it together at first, but then as he kept on going, I was kind of like, you mean mom? And he looked back at me, he's like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. But he just kept on going. I'll spare you the steamy barnside details, but let's just say that I just want it to be known that there's a peculiar pain with listening to your father describe to you in detail about how your mom's thighs were white like the snows of Kilimanjaro on the very nigh of your conception. It's a peculiar pain indeed, but let's just say apparently that nothing on the planet Earth closes a deal in the Amish community quite like a Holy Bible. So my dad was in luck, and 9 months later, unfortunately for the sake of comedy here at the Irishman on this Saturday afternoon, I was born. I don't know about that. I want to make sure everybody has their expectations appropriately calibrated, just in case anybody is expecting some kind of good, talented stand-up comic or good jokes or good anything at all. Don't expect that, okay? But I appreciate your willingness to just laugh at my shit anyways, okay? I don't even care if it's only that obvious pity laugh that you can muster, just that, oh, ha, 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 ha. Poor guy. Okay, I'll take it. You see, I will take that shit. Luckily, this isn't my first rodeo of disappointing people. I've been disappointing motherfuckers my whole life, okay, from a little boy, especially women. From my mom onward, they're just looking at me like, God damn, Zach, I thought you said good grades. Fuck. And then all the way up to my female physics tutor in college, just, God damn, Zach, I thought you could figure out what 7 times 7 equals. You had a calculator. What the fuck, man? And then that same female tutor later that night in her dorm room, just, God damn, Zach, I thought you said big dick. Fuck, man. I thought you said that you could bring it. Is that what you call bringing it? Where did you learn how to eat pussy? If I wanted something that sloppy and random moving, I would have stuck this box in the dishwasher. Ah! And then she looked at me and just said, you know what, get out. Just get out. You're going to fail physics, you dumb motherfucker. Get up, get out of bed, get your things, and get the fuck out. No more pussy for you. And so, I should warn you, before I really get started, that this upcoming story I'm about to tell you is kind of personal to me. It's sort of it's about an experience. It was a seminal experience that really shaped who I am today. So, I asked you for a little latitude that I might have to get a little vulnerable up here. It's a very dear story, and it all begins with a question. Okay, now what is it that defines the peak point of the coming of age process? That peak point of puberty between childhood and adulthood. There's really no according to Hoyle moment that says when a child's becoming an adult. Everybody has their own theories. Most of them are connected to the sexual development. spectrum, and I'm no different. Especially a deviant mind like me. What always made sense to me is that the most appropriate point to kind of illustrates that point of crossing over to more maturity is whenever you naturally understand a word like friction. When you're at that point in life where you've experienced enough where nobody has to explain the sexual context, but you just get it upon hearing the word friction. Adult. When I was 12 years old, my Uncle Richard taught me, and not my real uncle, but my dad's college buddy who'd always been introduced to me as Uncle Richard. I guess the name kind of stuck. But Uncle Richard taught me that the point I'd know when I'd become a man was whenever my penis knuckle grew in. And, I'm 12 years old. I'm like, what's that? And he went on to talk to me all about this whole puberty thing I was about to embark on. Basically all the same bullet points that I was learning right then at our junior high health class. Your voice gets deeper, hair under the armpits, you're going to grow hair in the groin region, etc., etc. And then Uncle Richard taught me that about 2/3 of the way up along my phallus, that a knuckle would form. But not just any knuckle, he was looking right at me. I'll never forget. He's kind of getting uppity about it, how he's describing it. He was like, this is a very special knuckle, God damn it, a very special knuckle indeed. And apparently this penis knuckle could rotate and turn at any angle, and it provided a special stimulation sensation capability. And so I was like, 12 years old, like a knuckle. And he was like, oh yeah, like a knuckle. So I was like, all right. So anyways, I hadn't seen Uncle Richard in a few years, and so then we somehow wind up on a float trip. And I remember after the canoeing trip, after we got off the river, we're in our swimsuits and life vests, and we're carrying Uncle Richard's brand new shiny canoe back up to his truck. And I had injured my hand somewhere along the float, and I was having trouble carrying it. And somehow his canoe slipped out of my hand and it hit the ground. This is a brand new canoe. Uncle Richard turns around, his eyes are just wide. He's filled with fury. I didn't really totally understand why, but he's just like, what the fuck's the matter with you? And I'm gonna give you a little physical description of Uncle Richard. Uncle Richard's, about a 6 foot tall, 6'2", kind of a broad-shouldered guy. He's an exact replica of Magnum PI, only his mustache was even more impressive. Uncle Richard had a mustache that was so thick and impressive that it would make Tom Selleck get down on his knees and beg for buttermilk. That's the truth. Uncle Richard turned to me and he was like, what's the matter with you? And, at this time, I'm 14 years old. I stuttered real bad at this time. And I also had a lisp. And so I didn't really understand what I did. I was like, sorry, Uncle Richard, I didn't mean to drive the canoe. And he just looked back at me and he started growling. He was like, ugh. And I realized, I learned later in life, I didn't know this at the time, but my Uncle Richard suffered from a mental disorder of advanced delusionary schizophrenia with involuntary narcissistic rage. And just in case anybody's wondering, oh, wait a minute, is that the same mental diagnosis as the Jim Carrey character in the Farley Brothers movie, Me, Myself, and Irene? And anybody asking that, I would answer, I don't know, I never saw that movie. But anyways, he looked at me and he was just like, just infuriated. He was just like, you saw that stuttering lisp. He was like, I bet you never get laid. And he said to me, and I remember he goes, before I turned to dick, and by the way, later in life, Uncle Richard became gay. But he said, he goes, before I turned to dick, I used to get more pussy than an abortion clinic. And I was like, okay, that sounds exciting, Uncle Richard. And he said to me, he goes, you'll never be a stud. Like, basically, it took a guy like Todd, a patient man like Todd Lowry, to control my Uncle Richard and kind of be his partner in life. And so anyways, we keep on going, we kept on carrying this canoe, and it slipped out of my hand again and it hit the ground. He turned around, just furious. And I don't know why he chose this particular insult, but he goes, hey, dick breath, quit dropping my canoe. It's worth more than your cheap dick breath breathing life. And I guess even us 14-year-old stuttering lisp boys have our thresholds. And I was like, not to get into the semantics of sexuality, Uncle Richard. But in this case, wouldn't it be your breath that smells of dick? And he looked back at me and he's fierce. He goes, only on the good days, little nephew. Only on the good days. And so finally we get back up to Uncle Richard's truck and we get inside and he's like frantically searching all through his console to find his bullet. He'd been kind of bitching all day on the river that he wanted to get back to his medicine. I should mention Uncle Richard's a bit of a cokehead. And so we get in, we start the car, we get on the highway, we pull up, we get on the road, we pull onto the highway, and I noticed two things, okay? Uncle Richard doesn't just take one or two bumps and puts his bullet away, but he's continuously hitting his bullet, like, And I also noticed that as we pull onto the highway, that our speed continuously is incessantly accelerating. Or, you know, it never plateaus, we never go slower, we're just continuing. And it keeps on going. And so as we were going, I started to really kind of fear for my life, just the way he was talking. Uncle Richard starts to analyze his life in the most downwardly dramatic and depressing way. He just lost a bunch of money on the stock market, and he also was suspecting that his husband Todd was cheating on him. So, you know, we're going, fuck the stock market, this guy's cheating on me, And I'm just over there in the corner, I'm like, Uncle Richard? He's like, shut up, bitch! And then, I guess for some reason, he was feeling constricted or whatever, so he goes to unzip his life vest. And whenever he did this, a wasp flew out. I don't fucking know how a wasp got in there, but apparently a wasp had gotten trapped under his zipper. And whenever he flew out, my Uncle Richard gasped, and he accidentally sucked the wasp into his throat. And this wasp goes down his throat and starts stinging his windpipe all up and down. And so he's going, he's continuously accelerating, and he's still hitting his bullet. And so it's like, sting, sting, ow, sting, sting, ow, This keeps on going fast, and I'm like, Uncle Richard? Anyways, so we keep on going, and then at some point it becomes clear that we need a hospital, and I see a hospital out of the corner of my eye, and I point, I'm like, there! And we just passed the exit. So Uncle Richard turns right, and we go off the highway, boom, boom, to the unpaved terrain, earth, and right back onto the paved part of the off-ramp for 1 second, and boom, 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 right back onto the unpaved terrain, earth, and boom, 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 we're going right towards the hospital building, boom, boom, boom. Uncle Richard's still hitting his fucking bullet. And I remember specifically saying to him, at this point in time, I turned to him and I said, we're about to die! And he's still hitting his bullet. And then finally he hits the brakes. But it's too late. He goes, we crashed into the hospital building. Luckily, I was wearing my seatbelt. And Uncle Richard wasn't, and I told you earlier, this story is, you know, forgive me if I get a little vulnerable up here. Uncle Richard wasn't wearing his seatbelt. I mean, you gotta wear your seatbelt. I don't know if you can figure out, but Uncle Richard died years later from pancreatic cancer. See, when we crashed into the hospital building, luckily, nobody was injured. Not only that, but because Uncle Richard wasn't wearing his seatbelt when he smashed into the steering wheel, the wasps came out. And then he turned and looked, and there's cocaine spilled out everywhere. In which, that's one part of the story I don't even get. How the fuck is there any cocaine after he's hitting it that many times? But whatever, okay, I was there. There's cocaine everywhere. And I get the impression that he wasn't wanting to take responsibility for his own spilled coke. Because he's wanting to, I think he was blaming somebody else, because he looked at me and said, "Why did you do this to me?" And so I was like, "Oh, Uncle Richard?" And anyway, so it's all good, all safe. He drives me back safely home, and a few years later, Uncle Richard contracts pancreatic cancer and dies. And unfortunately, as I'm sure some of y'all have to be aware, and via either a friend or family member or somebody who's had it, if you're going to make the choice to contract cancer, that pancreatic's quite the doozy. Okay, when you're looking down the litany of different cancers you can get, don't go with pancreatic. Okay, that's a pretty bad one. So, we're at Uncle Richard's funeral. I'm 16 years old, and I see his mom, Nancy. I've always had a thing for Richard's mom, Nancy. So we're at his funeral. I'm carrying Uncle Richard's casket. I'm a pallbearer. Remember, okay, Uncle Richard was a cokehead, so he's already stolen from and chased off any friends or family he's ever had in life. So it's a very, very short list of attendees here at Uncle Richard's wedding, funeral, or whatever. Same thing. And so we're carrying this. I'm carrying Uncle Richard's casket, and we have to stop for a moment while they set up the table that we're about to place this open casket on. Clearly, this is an impromptu wedding, funeral. But same thing. And so whenever we stopped, luckily I was right next to Nancy. See, everyone else was sitting in a church pew, but Nancy's wheelchair had been wheeled out into the aisle right next to her. And so I was right next to her, and I sensed my moment was afoot. Fortune favors the bold. I love that saying, fortune favors the bold. So I thought of the very best, most clever line that I could right then and there, and I leaned in, and I got closer to her old, gray hair-filled ear, and I whispered, I said, my arm's about to fall off. I sure wish your son had started that fucking diet about a month earlier. And she looked back up at me, she was all angry. And I looked back, I said, what? It's true. And she looked back and she said, I'll never forget her exact words, she said, better you than me, Sonny. I knew I wasn't carrying this fat ass down to that cemetery. And whenever she was chuckling, I knew that it was on. I knew that it was reciprocated. It was on. And so, I get her phone number, or I get the office number to the nursing home facility that she's at, and I call early that week, and I book me a date. And she and I go out, we go out to dinner, we have this awesome date and conversation and connection. That's really all any of us human beings are looking for walking around on planet Earth. It's a connection to another human being, and I really felt like me and Nancy had that. We were really relating to one another. I remember at one point we were exchanging awkward moment stories. I told her about this awkward moment where I had a relative at the Thanksgiving dinner table who tried to bring up the good parts in Hitler's book, Mein Kampf. I was like, awkward story. She's like, oh, that reminds me of a story. And she told me about this awkward moment where she was almost raped by a Nazi policeman right before she jumped into a boat and escaped to the great land of America. Which, by the way, Nancy was a Polish refugee. But anyways, me and Nancy had it going on. So after this, she told me about we talked about her late son, Richard. She said that she knew her son, Richard, was gay from a young age. She said she knew that Richard was gay the very moment that he told her he wanted to grow up and be a priest. And so we get back to her nursing home. I wheel her upstairs. And as I lean in and get close to scoop her up out of her chair and help her go to bed, I realize again, this is the moment, but fortune favors the bold. And she'd just taken her dentures out. So I went for it. And I'm so glad I did. We were making out and mugging down as I lead her into her bed. And then she reached out with her old, bony, veiny hand and proceeded to give me the usually dreaded HJ. It's a pretty loathed experience. Ladies, take it from me, none of us guys like the HJ. Right, just don't even touch it if that's where you're going. Just leave it alone. But Nancy had been on this earth for 103 years, and her experience shone through. Now, this wasn't a bad HJ. This was great. She was stroking up and down, faster and faster on my phallus. And then all of a sudden I felt this sudden surge of blood and energy going. It was an uncontrollable event that I didn't get because I couldn't foresee it. And there was a noise that must have woken up the entire 8th floor of Nancy's nursing home. But it was just like, "Kakoosh!" And I looked down. My knuckle had come in. Penis knuckle. Uncle Richard was not lying. Fucking penis knuckle. And Nancy was still guiding me in. She had her hands gently and firmly wrapped around my phallus. And she guided me into herself. And before I knew it, coitus, or however you pronounce that word, okay, sexual intercourse was occurring. And then I thought, as we were going, I had a hand on each of her bedside safety guardrails, and her bed was kind of squeaky. I was going, and she looked up at me and she goes, "Oh, suck!" And then I bent down on her. I was like, "Oh, Nancy." And she looked back up at me and she was like, "Oh, suck!" And I looked back down at her. I was like, "Oh, Nancy." And then I thought of the reason that I now had this knuckle, this special stimulation sensation capability that I now had. So I pressed down with all my energy and effort, and I went into enacting this penis knuckle, and I could feel it flip the latter sect of my phallus upwards, and it started to stimulate Nancy. And I know she felt it because she looked up at me and she goes, "Oh, I'm dying!" And that was the last look on her face, peering out into the world, right before she departed to the next life. And I felt complimented. But her last look was of pure joy and pure bliss. And by the way, I should give a quick little side note. My mom's actual name is Joy Bliss. And I learned all these jokes from her. So I gotta give a quick shout out. Hi, Mom. But as complimented as I was, it didn't take but a second for the moment to really soak in. Okay, someone had just died. Someone that I was inside of right then and there. I was inside of Nancy like that bee or like that wasp was inside of my Uncle Richard. In the moment the air got still and quiet, someone's soul had just departed. The room was uncomfortable. It was just me and Nancy, now it's just me. And then, that's the end of the story. Shots on JT.